Welcome everybody to another Thursday night class on Parsha of the week with the explanation of the Orach Chaim HaKadosh. This week's Parsha is Parshas Naso. Unfortunately, I won't be able to share my screen with you for the sake of being able to follow the text inside, only because my computer has been having some technical issues and refuses to connect to any internet connection. I took it to the Apple Store this afternoon, and I stumped the Genius Bar. So all the geniuses at the Genius Bar couldn't figure it out. So now it's in the middle of backing up, and once it's done backing up, they're going to actually just wipe the whole thing clean and see if they can just start fresh. So we'll see what happens with that. But right now I'm on my phone, so that's why it's going to be a little less interactive in that way. I won't be able to post the sources, but we'll go through it together. Much of what we're going to say as far as the parsha is concerned is very familiar. It's not nothing new. We're going to be discussing the parsha of Sota, a very interesting topic in the Torah. Those of you that have done Daf Yomi just made a siyum on Masechta Sota, so you're very familiar with all the ins and outs of how Sota works and the process and the technical aspect of it. But the Orach Chaim HaKadosh brings a very, very deep understanding into the general process, and helps us gain some insight in how we are supposed to live our lives. So let's start. The basics is that a woman who is suspected of infidelity, so there's an entire process that the Torah says. Her husband warns her, and he says, please don't seclude yourself with this particular man. I suspect that there's something going on or whatever it is. And he warns her, and she doesn't listen. And in fact, there is a point in time where she's secluded again after the warning with that particular man. Obviously, that man is not her husband, and therefore there's a concern of infidelity. Now, we don't know what happens behind closed doors. If we knew what happened behind closed doors, there were witnesses that saw exactly what was going on. So then there would be no discussion if she committed that terrible crime, that she was disloyal to her husband. So then she would be responsible to her husband would have to divorce her. She would lose her ksuba, so to speak. There'd be if there was witnesses with warning and it's two witnesses, so then there's the death penalty, whatever it is. And if she didn't do anything, if there were two witnesses that saw her behind those closed doors and they just said she was sipping a cup of tea and he was in the other room, blowing his nose, so then obviously she's perfectly innocent, nothing happens, and everything is fine. The question is, there's an uncertainty. We don't know what happened. We're not sure what was going on behind those closed doors. We don't have witnesses in that regard. That's the whole purpose of the discussion of Sota, is to clarify that uncertainty. We need to figure out what actually happened, or is there a way for us to determine whether she was guilty of this sin or if she's innocent of this sin. So the Torah prescribes some sort of, we'll call it a potion, a mixture, where you take water from the kior, as the Torah calls it mayim kedoshim, holy water, and you take some dirt from the floor of the ground and you put it into the water. And then you write out all these psukim that we're going to read on Shabbos, all the psukim of the Torah, and you write it onto a piece of parchment, and then you take that piece of parchment, you dip it into the water until all the ink dissolves into the water, and it's called mei hamarim, the bitter waters. And she drinks that concoction. Probably didn't taste very good, and if she is guilty, so then she suffers an unfortunate death. If she was innocent, so then it provides her with tremendous blessings. And if she had a hard time giving birth to her children, she'll have an easy time. Her children will be beautiful, and so on and so forth. So that is the overall idea of Sota. So the Orach Chaim HaKadosh has a few questions. Firstly, he says, why is it we find many different circumstances where the Torah requires some water from the kior to be used? For example, a Kohen, when he wants to go serve in the Beis HaMikdash, he had to wash his hands in the kior. So it says, "V'rachatz b'mayim," he has to wash his hands. So why? But it doesn't say mayim kedoshim. It doesn't say the holy waters. Here, suddenly we're saying, "Oh, this water is holy." Why does the Torah need to tell us that it's holy water? That's number one. Number two, he asks, what's the significance? The Gemara seems to have a discussion. Put the dirt in first, put the water in first. Why does that matter? Just put it in. What is the mixture? Why is that important that it matters the order of what's going on? And here asks another question. It says, interestingly enough, the Torah says, besides for drinking the water, she has to bring an offering, a mincha. This mincha is called minchas kenaos, a mincha of jealousy. and it's made out of barley. Now, barley is generally considered, I know we all have barley in our cholent, go figure, but in Chazal's eyes, in the Torah's eyes, barley is always meant to be animal food. Wheat and that type of grain is for human consumption. Barley is associated with animal food. And it's the commentaries explain, the Gemara explains that since she is suspected of doing something in a very animalistic behavior, so therefore we want her sacrifice, her offering to be also from an animalistic food or something like that. And it shouldn't have oil put on it. It shouldn't be nice. It shouldn't have the frankincense and all those things, all because we want to make sure that this it's recognized that this is coming from a negative place. But says the Torah says that she'll bring her minchas kinaos. Minchas is zikaron, it's a mincha of commemoration, mazkeres avon, to remember the sin. And says the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, you only need to remember something that happened a long time ago that you might have forgotten. If you didn't forget it, so then there's no need to remember it because it's right there. It's happening in the forefront of your mind. This woman standing in the Beis HaMikdash with her husband schleps her all the way to the Beis HaMikdash and says she did X, Y, and Z, and therefore she's drinking this water and everything. Well, it's very clear. What's mazkeres avon? We're trying to remember some sort of sin that occurred many, many years ago. So it just happened now. We're in the middle of a discussion right here, right now. So these are some of the questions that the Orach Chaim asks. And based on these questions, he has a very, very insightful idea, very interesting take on what exactly is going on during this process of the Sota. So now, says the Orach Chaim HaKadosh as follows. He says, firstly, we have to understand something about water. Water, we have a little bit of a misunderstanding, a little bit of a misunderstood creation. Why? Because you think of water, you think of something that when it rains, you think of the ocean, you think of something that gives you something to drink. But there's a lot of history to water. What's the history of water? When Hashem created the world, all the water was collected together. And then Hashem at one point split the Mayim HaTachtonim and the Mayim HaElyonim, the upper waters and the lower waters. The upper waters is some sort of moisture or some sort of water that's closer to the heavens. The lower waters are the waters that we see in the ocean and the rivers and the lakes. And there was a divide between those two things. And when that occurred, the Zohar says this about the water became salty, all of this because the water was mayim bochim. It was crying. Why was the water crying? It's because when Hashem had all the water together, so all the water was sitting, so to speak, right next to Hashem. They were connected directly to Hashem. It wasn't until that time, until there was a split, Hashem was, all the water was right next to Hashem. And that was the driving force and the purpose of all water, of really all creation. All creation strives to connect, to be as close to Hashem as possible. So then Hashem split the water. He had the upper waters and the lower waters. And then the Jewish people did enough transgressions that therefore Hashem, so to speak, removed himself, in a sense, from the lower area. So now the water on the bottom is all alone. And the water's crying and saying, we miss that relationship. We miss that connection to Hashem. We want to connect to Hashem again the way we used to connect. We're missing that. How do we connect there? So when was the opportunity that we were able to connect to Hashem? When did that occur? When we built, and Hashem told us, build the Beis HaMikdash. We had the Mishkan. Hashem said, you build a Mishkan, v'shachanti b'sochem, I'm going to dwell in you. And it's not just that Hashem is going to dwell down here in the Mishkan or the Beis HaMikdash the same way he dwells upstairs. It's not like, he alternates homes once a week. Chazal teach us, our rabbis teach us that Iker Shechina Batachtonim, the primary dira, the primary place where Hashem wanted to dwell was down here with us. He didn't want to be so distant. So it was when the Mishkan was built. So we had this opportunity that everything was now close to Hashem. And the water was Kedoshim. They were suddenly holy again because Hashem was now right next to that water. Now, what happened at the Chet HaEgel? Fascinating idea. There's another piece of water that, through our history. What happened at the Chet HaEgel, the sin of the golden calf? So Moshe was up on the mountain. He was receiving the Torah from Hashem. Hashem tells Moshe, you better go down and check out what's going on over there. It doesn't sound good. So Moshe goes down. He's holding the two tablets. And he looks and he sees the Jewish people. They're serving Avodah Zarah. They're worshiping an idol. They're worshiping the golden calf. So Moshe takes the tablets. He throws them down and smashes them to pieces. The entire nation gets quiet. And they realize they made a big mistake. And Moshe, the 3,000 Jews that actually did avodah zarah, that did idol worship, they had witnesses and were warned not to. Those 3,000 Jews were killed by the sword. They were punished. There were others that did served avodah zarah, but there was just no warning. There was witnesses, but nobody warned them, so they got some sort of plague. And those that had no warning and no no warning and no witnesses. So then, how did they get punished for what they did? So what Moshe Rabbeinu took the golden calf and he ground it up ad asher dak until it was fine, and he put it into water and he had everybody drink. And everybody drank that water. Once everybody drank that water, the people that were guilty died. So what you see here, says the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, is that the water mixed together with the golden calf, with the pieces of the particles of the golden calf, that was the trigger to punish those that were guilty. So then he says, wait a second, I don't understand. If you look at the water of the Sota, right? The Gemara, the Rashi in Parshas Yisro, when he taught, or in Parshas Kiseitze, Kisiso, in Parshas Kisiso, when he tells us about the Cheta Egel, and he tells about the Jewish people drinking the water, he says it was just like Mei Sota, it's just like the water from the Sota. So now, just like the water of the Sota, says the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, no, it wasn't. Here at the Cheta Egel, the sin was done with the golden calf. And that's what they drank. And the thing that they sinned with would be the testimony whether they were guilty or innocent. But the woman, she didn't do anything wrong with the words of the Torah per se. It's not like the ink that she sinned against the ink. She sinned with a man, possibly. So what is it? What's the connection exactly? So says the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, this is the connection. This is why it's exactly like the water, the water at the Cheta Egel. The Sota, what she is doing when she puts herself in this situation, she's disrupting that connection. The waters that until now, because the Beis HaMikdash is here, the Mishkan is here, Hashem is therefore dwelling down here, the water says, this woman, she's giving us a big problem. If the Jewish people continue to do bad things like this, Hashem is going to leave. He's going to leave this holy place. He's going to leave the Beis HaMikdash. He's going to leave the Mishkan. And you know what's going to happen? The Mayim is going to be bochim one more time. We're going to be stuck at square one. We're going to be left without Hashem. We're going to be bereft of that closeness that we've been trying to get. And then finally, when we have the Beis HaMikdash, we finally got it. And therefore, the water, together with the words of the Torah are the thing that brings us close to Hashem. So she did something that is going to cause a separation between Hashem. So the words of the Torah and the water, which are driving the connection to Hashem, that's going to be the very thing that's going to punish her, just like the sin of the golden calf. And he says, that's why it's called Mazkeres Avon. She brings her offering, and it's called Mazkeres Avon. It's to remember the Avon, to remember the sin. Now, what's sin? This is something that happened just now. We don't have Mazkeres. We don't need to remember something in the past. So says the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, when was the first time that Hashem separated himself from this world? What was the very first time that Hashem separated himself? When he created the world, everything was together. Hashem was right here. So when did he separate himself? When did he remove himself a little bit? It says the first time that Hashem removed himself from this world just a bit was when Adam Harishon ate from the Eitz Hadas, the sin of Adam and Eve, when they ate from the tree of knowledge. And Hashem said, you were doing so great. Everything that I told you to do, you listened. This one thing I told you not to do, you did it. Now I got to pull back a little bit. So this is a Mazkeres Avon. This is to remind us of that original sin. We shouldn't be like, or telling the Sota, this woman, don't be like that original sin. The same way that original sin of Adam Harishon, when he sinned, Hashem distanced himself. If you keep doing these things, Hashem is going to distance himself too. Remind yourself of that sin, of not the sin of her promiscuity per se, but rather the sin of Adam Harishon. That's why it's a Mazkeres Avon. We have to remember it from the past. So says the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, this is why this is the only place that the Torah calls it Mayim Kedoshim, holy water. Because right now, with Hashem in the Beis HaMikdash, with Hashem in the Mishkan, the water is holy because it has that closeness, it has that relationship. And therefore, this woman coming along and trying to go ahead and having done these things, causing a disruption in that relationship is only going to lead, if those things continue, it will lead to Hashem separating himself from this world. And that's why, says the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, Hashem said, you're going to put the ash, the dirt of the water, the dirt of the Beis Hamikdash, or the dirt of the Mishkan, into the water. And it matters the order. Why does it matter the order? It matters because you want to put the ash, first you put the water in, and then you want to put the ground on top. It says it's a sign to show us that the water is holy. The ground of the Mishkan, the ground of the Beis Hamikdash, the dirt from that area is also holy. It's also very, very holy. And we want that Hashem should be in close to us with the water, close to us in the land. It should all be just like if we were standing on the ground, we would be, Hashem was on the ground with us, we'd be close. We want the ground to be above our head because it's like the water. Hashem is standing next to the water and it's close to the water. So Hashem is close to every part in the Beis Hamikdash. He's close to the ground. He's close to the water. There's no difference. And therefore, the Gemara wants to know, make sure don't mix them together too much. There should be a separation. It should be clear that there's dirt and there's water, and Hashem is close to each and every part of nature. And that's the drive of every part of nature, to have closeness to Hashem. I heard a thought about, this is really the idea in an ocean. When you go to the ocean, what do you see? You see waves. And what are the waves doing? They rise and they crash. They rise and they crash over and over again. Why are the waves constantly rising and crashing? Why doesn't the water just stay calm? What's the need for rising and crashing? So the idea behind it is that the water is always trying to rise up and get close to Hashem again. It wants to get close to Hashem, have that connection. It wants to be like the time before Adam Harishon sinned, where you had the water, the upper waters and the lower waters, and they were connected and everything. Hashem was fully there. And therefore, we have the water, the Kadosh, Mayim Kedoshim, that goes into this story with the Sota, for the sake of us realizing that the water is holy because of Hashem's presence. And the Torah's words, the words of the parasha, get dipped into the water, just like the ashes or the ground up Cheta Egel, the ground up golden calf that was also put into the water, because it's the same thing that's causing the disruption. These words of the Torah are the way to connect to Hashem, and she was not doing things that would allow her to connect. And that's why it's a mazkeres avon, to remind us of the chet, the sin of Adam Harishon. And that's why the Torah tells us that she has to be the one that she brings she has this drink, and she has this offering of barley, which is animal food, to show that she's doing something that's going to cause. And he says a very interesting idea. He says the water, when it senses that it's being put in, the water, the ground, the ink that's being put in, when it senses that it's being put together to be prepared for this drink, for the sota, it's the water is saying to this woman, says, you're going to try and separate. I'm going to punish you. I'm going to come at you and show you you're going to be punished for trying to create that separation. We don't want to be mayim bochem anymore. We don't want to be the bitter waters, the crying waters. We want to have this closeness with Hashem. And that's why the water is the very thing that punishes this woman, because it's the one that's going to hold her accountable to make sure that she doesn't go ahead. And if she's guilty, she will be punished, that she shouldn't be around and therefore cause trouble for the relationship and the closeness that we have, or the water has, to Hashem. So just as a quick recap, we see this beautiful, beautiful insight as to what is going on with the Mei Sota, with the Sota waters. It's not just some process that there's no ideas behind it and what's going on. Really, the Orach Chaim is showing us a very, very profound idea. There's many different pieces to it. The one piece that we see is that every part of nature, the water, the dirt, the words of the Torah, every part of the Torah, and as well every part of creation, is done for the sake, has one drive, has one goal, has one desire, to have a closeness with Hashem. Not just us as people, not just the Torah, but even the water and the dirt of the Beis Hamikdash also have this desire to be close. And therefore, when the Hashem is dwelling in the Mishkan or the Shekhinah, there's a closeness to Hashem, and they will do anything to make sure that closeness stays, even if it means punishing this woman who is guilty. And that's one thing we see. And the other thing we see is that there's always a system of how Hashem runs the world, and Hashem is putting everything in this world for our own good and for our own sake. And therefore, he's showing us opportunities of where we can connect to Hashem. So this is the idea of the Orach Chaim HaKadosh. Perhaps the message for us is that anything we see in the world, anything we understand, is that their drive is to connect to Hashem. So we should inspire ourselves. Our drive should also always be to connect to Hashem in any way possible. and thereby fulfilling the purpose of creation just as much as the Mayim Kedoshim wanted to fulfill. So just the questions that the Orach Chaim HaKadosh had was, why is it called Mayim Kedoshim here of all places? Why is it called Maskeres Avon, to remember some sin? If it just happened, we don't need to remember it. It's right here. And why are we discussing the water and the dirt? So says the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, the purpose is to tell us that the Maskeres Avon is to remind us of the original Chet of Adam HaRishon that happened way back when. That just like Adam HaRishon's sin caused the distancing of Hashem, this sin would also can also cause a distance of Hashem, and that's why the water is going to punish the woman. Because right now the water is the Mayim Kedoshim, it's the holy water because of its closeness to Hashem, and it doesn't want to lose that status to go back to becoming the Mayim Bochim, the crying waters. And the same way that the water has this closeness, the dirt of the Beis HaMikdash has that closeness, the words of the Torah provides that closeness, and that's supposed to show us that our drive should always be to have closeness to Hashem. Thank you all so much for coming. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to try and answer them. If not, have a wonderful Shabbos.
Rabbi, what were the consequences for the ones who drank the water with the ground up egel? Did they also were they also at risk of the same outcome as the sota?
So it wasn't the exact the Torah for the sota. It says that her thighs will cave and her stomach will swell and all of that. There it just says that they died. It doesn't
they died.
That,
okay,
but they did die. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And the sota has the option of admitting her guilt, right, and avoiding.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then avoiding all of this.
And then what happens to her? She's a pariah, and her husband divorces her.
Her husband divorces her. That's right. Yeah. She may not marry the man that she was guilty with. She can marry other people, but yeah.
Okay. And does the husband have the option of reconciling with her, or is it declared that he has to separate?
Right. He has to separate. The halacha is if a woman is unfaithful to her husband willingly, then they must divorce. They cannot stay married.
Okay.
If she was raped or she was forced, so then they may stay married with the exception of a Kohen.
All right. So we say she's broken the bond between them.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. It's in that relationship, if in that model, I should say, the same model applies for us and Hashem. Hashem is the man of the household. We are the woman. The Jewish nation are his bride, and we have to stay loyal to Hashem, lest we do something to break that relationship.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And of course, as a woman, I say, what happens when the man does his thing?
Yeah. So in fact, let's to play out the story, so to speak, the same way the woman, if she's guilty, she gets punished. The Torah doesn't speak this out straight out, but the Gemara says this, and it's learned from the Torah that the man also gets punished. He also dies. That's right. That's right. He's also guilty. Not the husband, he's the innocent one, but the person that she was guilty with. That's right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you. We'll see you again next week.
And Mr. Shem, we're looking forward. Thank you so much for coming. Have a wonderful
welcome.
Shabbos, everybody.
Good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right.
Thank you. Bye-bye.